All right, how's it going, everyone? Long time no see. New episode of Talking Tracks, and I'm sure if you follow the podcast somewhat, you're thinking in the back of your mind, or your first thought is, where have you been for almost 2 months? And I would tell you I have been away from the podcast. I did not intend for this to happen, really. When I last uploaded in October 19th was the Mild High Club Going Gone review, which, by the way, thanks for listening to that. That actually got a decent amount of listens. Didn't really think too many people would listen to that, honestly, as I dropped it. But here we are, 2 months later. And yeah, I'm happy to say I am putting this podcast back in some sort of activity. What happened around October 17th or October 19th? Well, I started grad school around that time, or, as Halloween was approaching. At somewhere in the around October 20th, it's been kind of a blur. Not making a sob story around this, but yeah, I got burnt out essentially, and I really did not find it possible to make time to upload album reviews and talking tracks, regularly with quality. Because I do like to be somewhat methodical and think about what I'm going to put out review-wise. And I guess I was just burnt out too with reviewing stuff. With October and I guess now December, it's been well over a year that the podcast has existed. And I have been uploading quite regularly since, I think, April 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, when everything was changing. At that point in time, I was unemployed. And I really didn't have much responsibilities, so I needed to do something, which now I'm really blessed to say and thankful that I'm back on my feet, and I work full time, and I decided to go to grad school for a master's degree. But nonetheless, that's enough about me. I was just informing anyone that likes to listen to this, because I did look at the Spotify Wrap for this year, and there are some of you that I'm grateful for that actually do make this their podcast of choice on Spotify, meaning that they listen to this podcast more than any other podcast. And I was actually quite astounded that that was the case. So thank you, everyone that has listened to this, and I'm very sorry for any disappointment for my absence, but I am back with at least the talking tracks for now. I don't know how the rest of the year will look, if we're going to put out like an album review at some point. It's kind of too late for that now that, the album cycle is pretty much dead, for this year at least. But there's like an album or two that I'm curious to go back on. That, who knows, I might put out a review. Just like Snail Mail's album comes to mind, the Porches album. I know Adele. I don't think I'm going to review the Adele album, but, the Adele album seems interesting. I know Lana dropped an album too. And of course, there's probably various hip hop artists that have dropped between now and then that I probably would have at least maybe touched on one. But nonetheless, let's just go ahead and get into what the episode is going to be today, which is Talking Tracks, which I believe officially is episode 6 of Talking Tracks. But really, what my plan is just to put some episodes of Talking Tracks to end out the year, and just so we could also catch up on best and worst track of the week. So what this episode will be was just a standard episode of 10 tracks that I think are pretty interesting right now. And then we'll just end it with the conclusion of October's Talking Tracks. The next episode of Talking Tracks hopefully will include all of November's best and worst track of the week. And then depending on, how I think we can end the year off, if I'll cover all of December, or at least cover to the point where the end year list has concluded for Billboard Hot 100, which that always confuses me how they do that. It's in like the beginning of December somewhat. It's very strange. I have to research a little bit on how that works, but nonetheless, I am happy to just have 10 tracks to talk about today. So we'll go ahead and get into that with first track, Once Twice Melody by Beach House. Now, this is a track, actually Beach House just released an album. What am I thinking? So this was, I think, the lead single coming coming out of this album, literally just released less than a week ago. And, you know, I am not the most, observant Beach House listener, or I'm not really like on my toes to see what they'll release next. But I think that like 99.9% of Beach House music, like I dig, like very rarely am I turned off by their music. This track was a nice, pleasant surprise. Because I liked it more than like the average Beach House track. It does have the standard ambience and etherealness that you'd expect. The track really turns out nice when the, classical Beach House haunting vocals coats the track. I will say that the incorporation of some synth strings on the more climatic parts here was a nice choice that gave the track some character, nice balance as well with all the textures that are thrown in on here, with a lot of clarity of that drum track as well. I thought overall it's a nicely produced track. After that, Bloc Party with Traps. This is a band that I've been a fan of since I was like a teenager or preteen. Their music was essential in me getting involved in picking up bass guitar when I was young, and some of their tracks were some of the first ones I learned how to play. And I just have a lot of respect and appreciation for this band, even though that their classic lineup is now defunct. The frontman Kelly something, I don't want to butcher the name, is still keeping the act alive even as they have like a solo career. But this track in particular, I think, is nice mainly because of it sounds like where the band had left off on their fourth album when it was the last original lineup. It just sounds like vintage Bloc Party in a sense, especially with that 4 album. With how they implemented a lot of heavier material. I'm digging the syncopated feel on that chorus there. Love some of the grittiness that's found in the grooves that is supported by the bass and the guitar. That's kind of like a classic Bloc Party thing. It's just very groovy, riffs. The sparkly synths thrown in the track, the effect-driven guitar solo that, kind of just makes Bloc Party show up here. So yeah, it's a good track. After that, we got kind of a sleeper with Alt J's Get Better. Alt J is kind of like on a very middle of the road trajectory. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, but I just don't know really where they're going, especially with this track. The vocals sound quite fuzzy and turned up. Not sure if I like that. It's a bit of an uncomfortable listen. I would have liked to hear more clarity in the guitar accompaniment as well. It sounded a bit, just not as organic as I would have liked from like an Alt J track. It's kind of like this lo-fi aesthetic too, with the quality on here. It's quite stripped down. It sounds almost like a less catchy and poppy version of I Can Tell That We Are Going to Be Friends by the White Stripes. Super, a bit of a lethargic feel. Track takes a bit too long to develop, in my opinion. After that, we got Billy Goodbye by Franz Ferdinand. Sounds like it's a shade different than what I typically hear from Franz Ferdinand, but I will say I have not kept up with this band much in a few years. But this track, it basically has like less typical rock norms. It's more pop rock, in a sense, maybe kind of like this slight Elton John influence. The piano peeking through at points in the track kind of attests to that. I do like the shaker used for some auxiliary percussion in the bridge. It, livens the track up a bit. But the track is enjoyable. I am typically looking for something a bit harder hitting from Franz Ferdinand, though. After that, we got a track from the band Eels the Magic. This was a pretty cool track. It's a very enjoyable rock cut that's quite straightforward with like a gritty guitar tone that's doubled up with lots of character. A nice groove established in the drum that kind of creates a nice foundation for some psychiness to come in. I just am a bit confused because the only reason I kind of like looked into reviewing this track is I thought this band sounded completely different. More along the lines of like a dream pop or like a new wave influenced alternative rock band. But yeah, that was just a bit of a confusion on my end. But I guess I came out liking the track. Next one is Start the Healing from Korn. I don't think I've ever talked about Korn on this podcast. I figured, hey, now could be a cool time. It has the typical primal sound that you would expect from Korn. I'm digging like the buzzy lead guitar line in the chorus. The sound, in my opinion, still hasn't sounded like it has evolved much since like the 2000s. But it's actually sort of a poppy chorus in a sense. Reminds me the melodic material, at least on the chorus, is just a little bit reminiscent of Taylor Swift's I Should Have Said No. I don't know if that's just me. It's an interesting track. It sounds a bit like Chevelle, too. I guess Chevelle had a more like a poppy side to them with their big choruses. But yeah, that's Korn's latest single. Next one after that was Yumi Zouma's Mona Lisa. This is like a dream pop, indie pop band that I've been listening to quite casually over the past few years. It's not a bad cut, Mona Lisa. It's a bit of an overall heavier sound, especially at the beginning, but it's still, this track definitely still keeps like their typical dreamy nature. I'm digging the clean guitar lines that color the chorus, the driving groove that's created by the bass as well. And I love how smooth and natural the vocal harmonies come together as well. I'm just not a fan of like the 80s inspired outro with like the horns kind of sounding a bit misplaced. That's kind of my, 2 cents on that. After that, Perfect Blue by Softcult. This is a shoegaze inspired, maybe, I guess, for lack of a better term, alternative rock band, pop rock band, but with some heavy shoegaze influence, that I recently found out they're like a derivative of like another band that I guess was big in the like post MySpace era. I think they're a punk rock band, like post MySpace era that has like a cult following at least. But yeah, Softcult is like their side project that I've listened to a few tracks that I think are quite nice. Usually there's a catchy pop flavor to their brand of like shoegaze dream pop. This track in particular has like a heavy shoegaze flavor to the with some nice guitar hooks that give the track some structure, some murky verses that contrast with like the heavier chorus sections, mainly with how the drum effects are switched up between those two sections. Not sure if I'm liking it better than the other Softcult tracks I've heard, especially in recent memory. Also, the song sounds weirdly nostalgic to me for some reason, for some other band I can't really put my finger on. I'm not going to point any fingers at Softcult, but they have had recent, controversy with them stealing some ideas, so that might be why. I don't know. I'm not saying they did, though. I'll Get Over It by Madeleine Kenny. This is like an artist that I've been following a bit. I like their sophomore album. I can't really remember the title of it, but if you know Madeleine Kenny, they're a talented singer-songwriter that kind of just follows along with like art pop and art rock with like a slight indie touch to it. This track in particular starts out quite ambient, almost aimless with how abstract it can be. Probably one of the more experimental tracks I've heard from her. I dig how the vocals still remain quite steady and consistent as the rest of the track just goes. all over the place, really. I'm not sure if this direction is exactly what I was hoping for, but I still kind of dig it. I feel like, this is just one track in an upcoming project that will make sense in the context of the album. And then finally, the last track we have is Where Do You Go by Daywave. Daywave's another kind of like dream pop, indie pop act that I've been following for a few years now, with I've been kind of hoping they put out more material, but we're finally getting some. This track sounds pretty much like a classic Daywave track, if there's such a thing. Pretty reminiscent from like the debut album, with the style being very eighth note driven. But I do like the chirpy guitar melodies that color the chorus. I was glad like this track in particular was able to keep some of the charm that Daywave is known for throwing on the track. On their music. Lately, the singles I've heard from I guess this upcoming project seem to have kind of like lost that like charm that I kind of really like, that I feel like only really Daywave can put on their music. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's kind of like this nostalgic sound that it really comes from the vocals, but it all works together. Still maybe not as hard hitting and memorable as the stuff from the debut album, though. Not bad, though. Hopefully, I'll get to see them, because this is one band I've been really wanting to see. But anyways, yeah. That concludes the talking track portion. 10 tracks that I think are interesting. Hopefully, I have another 10 for you guys soon. But anyways, we're just going to talk a bit for... we're going to have 2 weeks worth of best worst track of the week. So not much more. 4 tracks in total. We'll start with the week of October 23rd. The best and worst track. But just some highlights. I'm way behind on the Billboard Hot 100. But pretty much the current state of the chart is as you'd expect for December. But there are some things that kind of found that were interesting. Easy on Me by Adele's at number 1. I know that Adele's still very prevalent, I guess, in pop music, but I'm just very surprised that it's this high, and that she's kind of killing it still, with being so far removed from the last project, full-length project that she released, and that project, I guess, not being her most popular work either. Stay by the Kid Laroi at number 2, which I know this is a massive hit, probably one of the biggest tracks of this year. It features Justin Bieber, but I'm kind of surprised it's still at number 2 for being kind of like a summer thing. And it's obviously Christmas mode on the chart. It's all over the chart right now, especially in the top 10. The typical suspects are there. Heatwave's up to number 8. This is something that I was really surprised about. Last week it was number 7, so it peaked there. And this is a track that, it's already been released for over a year now. It's a summer 2020 track. I reviewed the album by Glass Animals, Dreamland, and I really hate to give myself credit, but I said it when I heard it. This sounds like a hit. This sounds like they're copying a Post Malone formula, and the American audience just ate it up, because now it's December 2021 and still lingering around like a Post Malone track. I don't know if it'll get any higher, but at this point I've said that several times and it's proving me wrong. But we'll see. By Your Side by Rodwave. I guess this is a new entry at 58. I'm interested to see what Rodwave maybe does this year. Glad to see he's still entering on the Hot 100. And yeah, all over the chart, there's just signs of a lingering Adele album bomb. Enemy by Imagine Dragons at 68. The only reason I'm really caring about this because I'm surprised that there's a newish Imagine Dragons song on the Hot 100, just kind of doing its thing. I did listen to a bit of it, and it sounds like an Imagine Dragons song. There's really nothing else to say other than Jid is on there, and it's just very interesting that collab happened, and I think that's kind of why this track is charting. Baddest by Young Blue. At this point, it's probably like one of our several month-old best tracks of the week, or best track of the week from a long time ago, in the middle of the year. Still at 97, hanging on. Even though this track has shitty Chris Brown on it, I still kind of like it. I don't know why. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the worst track of October 23rd. Jonas Brothers with Who's in Your Head. This kind of won by, or got worst track by default. I will say this week was interesting. There was a nice Cody Johnson track, a track by Oliver Tree, a really generic Lady A track that sounded like it was like straight up from like the writing of the TV show Nashville. Like, it sounds like one of those songs they just gave Hayden Panettiere's character because they had to, like, you know, throw in her performing every once in a while to make the show believable. And then another nice little country track that was better than expected, Priscilla. I don't think I'm saying that right. Priscilla. We'll just go with Priscilla Bloc. Just About Over You. Nice little cut there. Better than a lot of other country tracks of recent memory. And then, that's kind of just what I wanted to say. There's just some interesting notes, but back to worst track of the week. Who's in Your Head by Jonas Brothers. I had hope for this track as it opened up with like a decent groove. It sounded a bit like Kevin Jonas's DNCE, like that little project he had going on that actually was a lot better than it should have been. But as soon as we get to the chorus, we hit on this like super cheap rendition of like a B-side inspired Maroon 5 song. It just sounds like they're trying to copy Maroon 5 and steal their formula at this point. Some of the vocals are also painfully whimpery and weak. And then the one thing I will say is that this doesn't really sound like the Jonas Brothers either. That's probably the most interesting thing about this. At least in the sense that it doesn't sound like their most recent material. It's a bit too by the numbers. That's why I gave it worst track of the week. Best track of the week was really nice. Lo Siento, Baby. By Tainy featuring Bad Bunny and Julia Venegas. This is an interesting collaboration, mainly because Julia Venegas is a Mexican singer, pop artist that is, quite established, especially in Latin America. She is kind of like an artist that is still kind of tied to like the old Latin pop music that kind of has gone away. That was more similar to like 2000s American pop music. Just might be like more soft rock inspired. I really miss that sort of style of Latin pop music, but she seems like she's trying to collab and make some sort of fusion with Bad Bunny here. And I guess the producer here is Tainy. But thank God Tainy has another track other than that terrible Summer of Love track with Shawn Mendes. This is just a huge improvement. I'm super impressed with Julieta. She's just jumping on this track so organically, and playing an integral role on it. She sounds great with her signature vocals. on here, that, just color the track so nicely. The transition of Bad Bunny's, section, I guess he kind of just takes over the rest of the song past a certain point. There's a nice effect there. He has some big and presentness to his vocals, that go along with like this boomy EDM inspired production and drum machines that, fit quite well to Bad Bunny's style, his typical style at least. And I'm liking the colorful effects that are thrown on his voice all throughout here. Bunny's vocals are haunting and large, and it's kind of what you want from him to get the full effect. So it's a really nice track here. Anyways, worst track of the week. Let's go Brandon by Loza Alexander. Don't count on ever hearing that name again, because the only reason this track is charted probably because it was a meme. It's a cheap rap track that wouldn't have ever garnered any attention unless there wasn't a cringy right-wing culture that loves to hammer on really unimpressive inside jokes in just about every facet of their lives, it seems. This Let's Go Brandon slogan has been already it's already like its own industry. There's hats, there's shirts. The track references Squid Games. It's just kind of pointless. I'm not sure how many people will even remember this track in the coming months. This is just a symptom of something else, I think. And, there's some people that, kind of fell for it. There's cheap production on here. The hook's cheap and passable rapping. Given its audience, passable rapping. If this was, going up against, any other innocuous modern contemporary rapper, Loza Alexander would not even be able to be in the same zip code. I don't really know what else to say. Everything about this is just cheap. So it by default it's worst track of the week. Bubbly by Young Thug featuring Drake and Travis Scott. Best track of the week. There was a lot of hip hop this week. I think it was like a MIDI Young Thug album bomb. Wasn't too impressed by it. Young Thug's declined a little bit. We'll just say that. But this track, Young Thug, Drake, and Travis Scott, right off the bat, this track should not have been anywhere near bad, let alone even kind of flirting with being mid. I feel like it kind of just grazed mid, though, considering, though, that, Drake and Travis Scott and even Young Thug are some of the biggest names in rap in the past, I don't know how many years. They might be all-time greats for all I know. I don't know about Young Thug, but he might have already secured that. But Drake and Travis Scott are... when they're on a track, it should mean something. So the fact that all three of them are on here, it should have been pretty good, and it actually is pretty good. It should be quite hard for them to fail. I will say Travis Scott and Drake are kind of the better of the three on here. Travis has a jumpy and bouncy flow that's pretty good. The beat has a chirpy synth that accompanies his flow quite well. There is a beat switch when Drake comes in, so it's just stylistically the track changes. But I do dig the change in the mood and the overall color. Drake has this catchy accent at the end of his lines that give the track a bit of character. There's a nice soft keyboard accompaniment to go along with, Drake as he fades out, and then the track kind of just decays with that soft accompaniment. And it's just a decent track. It was better than everything else this week, to be honest. So, that's Best and Worst Track of the Week for October 30th. That concludes, I believe, the 6th episode of Talking Tracks. Once again, thanks for listening. I hope to be back at some point with another episode Talking Tracks by the end of the year. Hopefully another one. We'll see. Nonetheless, take care of yourselves. I'm out.